everybody, welcome to Tech Tales. Glad to have you here for another video. I hope this helps anybody out there who's really trying to shop for a VR headset for the holiday season, or you're just on the lookout for a new VR headset. This is primarily focused on the Valve Index. It's not really focused on any other headsets. I do have experience with the HP Reverb G2, and I also have experience with a lot of headsets. The Vive, the Vive Pro, the Oculus CV1, the Rift S, Quest 2, Quest 1, Quest Go, all of what you would want. So we're going to cover those things and just going to discuss whether or not you should buy the Valve Index in 2021. And again, I might have strong opinions, but it's not just about 2021 for me. It's also whether you should have even bought this when it came out. And even now, when you go into VR circles, people are full of hype on the Valve Index. And here, we don't care about the company so much as the product. So I did purchase the Valve Index from my own pocketbook. It was $1,081 or something like this, with taxes and shipping, or the MSRP of $999. Now, one thing we can establish here, in terms of its competitor, it would instantly be the Oculus Rift S, which is a PC VR competitor for the Valve Index. Now, Facebook, or are they Meta now? Meta, Facebook? Facebook decided, okay, we're just going to stop supporting the Rift S. And, you know, while this is kind of bad news, and the headset is technically discontinued, it shouldn't even be up for discussion. However, it does exist, so it will remain in discussion as long as people can buy it. So you will see comparisons with the Oculus Rift S here. Sorry, not sorry. Demi Lovato. Okay, so what we are discussing when it comes to the Valve Index, on first impression, unboxing it is a very well thought out packaging. It has 2 layers for the full VR kit. There's a top and a bottom. The top is for the headset and controllers, and the bottom is for the wires, and all that stuff. Now, initially coming from a Rift S, it is a very low profile. And we know, for example, that the Rift S was, and I'm going to tell you guys this, was $399. Okay? After taxes, you're looking at $450, right? And it was 1280 by 1440 per eye with a field of view of an 88 degree horizontal, 88 degree vertical. People would consider that super narrow. And again, the lenses were Fresnel single LCD lenses with the RGB stripe on them. Now, the cool part about the Rift S, and this will freak out a lot of VR people because, oh my god, the accuracy. It's like, we'll get to the accuracy. I promise you, we will get to the superior accuracy. But for those of you who don't know about VR, there is something called inside-out tracking and outside-in. So the Rift S has inside-out tracking, meaning it tracks from the inside of the headset to the outside, and it utilizes cameras. Okay, so it utilizes cameras, and essentially that is how it tracks in terms of 6 degrees, 6 DOF via the 5 integrated cameras. So that's what's cool. You don't need to worry about, well, and this is the thing with the Valve Index. Now, I had the Vive when it first came out for about, I believe it was $1,000 as well. I had it and I sold it, thankfully, recouped my money back because I really didn't use it. And shockingly, there's a little deja vu here when it comes to the Valve Index, because again, I felt a little bit similar, and we'll get into that. But with the Valve Index versus the Rift S, you have what's called outside in, meaning you need to set up these little things called base stations. They look like little squares, and you can put them as long as, and they have little rotors in them, and they have essentially sensors at a certain field of view as well. I believe for the Valve Index, it's like 130 by 115, something like this. So there's a vertical, and then there's a horizontal field of view. I would say that we'll get into more of why that's important later. But there is a lot more setup with the Valve Index. And the setup harkens back to when I had the Vive. Nothing is different. The lighthouses are a Lighthouse 2.0 versus the 1.0 with the Vive. And you can set those up, and they're supposed to be better. They don't have to be at an equal height or anything like that, but Valve does recommend put them as high as possible, pointed towards the center of your play area in opposite corners. And not only that, these puppies have to be powered because, again, they have motors in them, so you have to literally plug them to an outlet, and then you have to route a big wire to an outlet, and then another wire on the opposite side to an outlet. And oh my god, just when I thought it was over, you then have to take another power cable to the headset. And so in the end of it, you're using 3 outlets. And so you're thinking, wow, this thing must be this thing must be really powerful. This thing must be like, I'll turn it on and like the Hadron Collider will shut down or something. Or like a neutrino will come through. I don't go off my physics references. But that's the impression you get because it is very loaded in terms of its setup. So yes, there's a lot of people, if you have tried the Rift S, you would come up with a high expectation that, bulkier, perhaps more powerful. It's only human. But science says otherwise. So once all this complicated setup is done, we put it on, and then this is where I noticed that when I put on the headset for the first time, obviously you need to do adjustments. So one of the adjustments I did was putting it onto a ceiling hook system, pulley system that'll keep the wire up. And the Rift S wire was just weighted heavier, so the pulley system was having a little more issues, and I had to adjust it a lot of the times to make sure there wasn't slack, but sometimes there was slack behind me. That's user error. I just had to really find the sweet spot for the cable for my setup, which is a pretty narrow setup in my opinion. It's not a big... I don't have a whole room for VR. I'm very happy for you guys who have an entire living room dedicated and you're whizzing past the kids. Congratulations. I don't have that. I don't think many people have that kind of setup. So I have a very modest empty space next to the computer area. And again, the computer area has to be located near the wire, and the wire is about, I believe, 5 meters for the wire. Let's just check. I was right, 5 meters. So the wire is a 5 meter tether with a 1 meter breakaway. So technically 6. The breakaway is in case you trip, it doesn't yank the computer and damage it. That is a really nice touch if you keep your wires on the floor, in which case I'm gonna ask you, why do you want to do that? Get the pulley, put the screws in the ceiling, use some spackle to cover them up after you move out from your rental or whatever. No excuse for not having those pulleys. It is a game changer. Pulleys on VR, please use them. Public service announcement for the pulleys. In any case, once that was done and I put on the headset, I started up Steam VR, began the process, and Steam VR said my space wasn't big enough. Struggled with it a little bit, but finally got this play space ready and was able to. So there's 2 options with setting up a play space. You can either trace your outline, or you can just literally click corners of your room. That's called advanced mode, and it'll draw a perfect square, rectangle, whatever width and length your corner was. So this is where I noticed I had problems with my setup, regardless of me doing it in the way they mentioned. There wasn't as much flexibility as I initially thought with these base stations. You really, if you kind of go out of view of these base stations, you'll start getting graying happen on your headset, which means the Valve Index does not have line of sight with one of the base stations, which I found quite peculiar because it was in line of sight of the base stations, but yet had the problems. Another thing, and again, I adjusted the base stations, and then I decided, okay, you know what, rather than have them at these uneven heights, let's just do what Valve recommends, put them really high, opposite corners of the room, pointed center. Yet, regardless of doing this, the Valve Index still had a bit of disconnection issues, time to time. Little rare, but also immersion breaking. Now, again, I completely agree that this can be user error. However, I do believe that ease of use and setup should be factored into something when you're reviewing it or when you're giving an opinion on it. An opinion. So, please, Valve Index owners out there, please don't flood my comments about, you suck. You didn't do this right. You didn't have an entire room dedicated to the VR. Nobody has that, okay? Lucky you. Please invite me to your mansion. But nobody has that. In any case, I did do the opposite sides. I even measured the ruler. They were equidistant to the center of the play space. And yet I was having issues. And I kind of felt like it was, as I was adjusting these lighthouses, that I was back into my Vive days. Where I had to adjust. And those base stations were worse. But oddly enough, that experience seemed to be, even though those base stations are worse, it seemed to have been better. Because also another problem I ran into after setup was done was I would have, as I was go from left to right or something, I would have a little bit of jitter. And I measured the jitter of the headset. And it would happen regardless. There would be like the slight jittering effect. Now, again, I did run tests. I ran a jitter test, and it gave me an average max deviation of 1.4, I believe, after 10-point measurements. And you guys can probably see that on the screen here. You can see all the tests being done in terms of the jitter test on this. And so nothing on it seems awkward or unusual. It's just a plain Unity environment that keeps that can detect jitter quite easily, because there's no more API for the game developer to have somehow added that extra latency or jitter to your headset. So at first I thought when I was playing Boneworks, it's probably the game, but then seeing the reviews of how people love it, I was a little bit like, maybe it's not the game. Did some tests, and again, it's just jittering from the headset. And what fixed this to a good degree was removing the plastic faceplate snap-on that Valve Index has at the front of it. Now that helped, but it didn't completely alleviate it. So again, maybe setup error in my part, but again, it shouldn't be this difficult. That's the point I'm trying to make. Now, despite having gone through all these hoops to put in 3 outlets, get the base stations exactly where they needed to be, God forbid they deviate. And if they deviated, then the headset wouldn't remember the play area, and suddenly you're outside of the play area, and then the headset's freaking out. So you always have to reset up after you make major changes. Maybe not rotational, but if you move them around, make sure to redo the setup. But regardless of doing even that and doing the setup correctly, sometimes the Index would just kind of struggle to pick up the play area. And so, I'd have to run through setup again, but, again, nothing too crazy, because a lot of the times it did work. So after getting all of this ready and working, put on the headset, you think it's going to be a groundbreaking experience, and all of a sudden, and this is just pure thoughts here, I was like, oh my god, this looks just like the Vive. In terms of picture quality, and I really care about picture quality, and I think a lot of people care about picture quality, right? I mean, a lot of people care, which is why a lot of people would say, well, the resolution. What's the resolution on it? The Index, we have 1440 by 1600 resolution, whereas with the Oculus Rift S, it's 1280 by 1440 per eye. So obviously there's a little bit of a resolution bump per eye in terms of the picture quality, right? And apparently the field of view on the Index is supposed to be 107 horizontal to 104 vertical. So you're supposed to be able to see a lot more. And I'm not denying that. But what I am denying is the wow factor. The picture quality, although on paper seems better, and objectively it probably is, that would be assuming that there weren't problems with the Valve Index. And the major problem with the Valve Index, even though there's a dual element canted Fresnel lens as part of the Valve Index, and there's a lot of fanciness going on, and you think, wow, this has got to be better, right? It felt like text was blurry, and no matter what adjustments I did to the IPD, and I know my exact IPD, so don't even get on me about, did you check your IPD, and did you try turning it off and on again?
Hello, IT? Have you tried turning it off and on again? Oh, okay, well, the button on the side, is it glowing?
Yeah, it's not about that. It's purely after making sure all these elements were controlled, the Valve Index just did not Vow-lve Me, right? Get it? Vow-lve Me. Wow, okay. It didn't wow me, okay? It just didn't wow me with it. And, it has a wide, IPD range, 58 to 70 millimeters. And you can adjust it from the bottom, and you get a nice little interface showing you what the IPD is. And then you can adjust the head strap, and I played around with the weight of it a lot, and just really made sure it was tight to head and it was seated properly. I even did some techniques where people said wear it like a crown and put it like this, right? I did everything to really try to see, maybe this is just me. There's no way this $1,000 headset can look so bad, right? Wrong. So it's not that it looked bad, it's just compared to a Rift S, fine, it might have more resolution, but it was not noticeable to me whatsoever. Not a bit. And again, this is where we come into, well, how great is your eyesight? My eyesight's alright, it's pretty good. I mean, I can maybe take you guys to my optometrist, and we can really make this a crazy review. But the reality is that for most people wearing these, these headsets, especially if you had a Rift S and you're coming to a $1,000 Valve Index, you will be surprised that the quality is lackluster, is the word. Disappointing is the word, because you spent $1,000 on it. And while, I'm looking at text, it's kind of blurry. It seems to be doubling in the text, a lot of glare going on, and it looks kind of like, you ever kind of see through dirty pair of glasses, it's like starburst, lights are just kind of reflecting and glaring. That's what it looked like. Now, I managed to get it relatively clean, but it still had the whole Godrays effect going on, and this is the thing that I noticed with the Valve Index. There's a lot of Godrays. Now, whatever resolution increase per eye you get, or whatever field of view increase you get, it left extremely a lot to be desired. And dare I say, it cancels out a lot of those resolution gains. Now, one thing people might mention, well, the Valve Index has the 144 hertz. Did you know it has 144? Whereas your crappy Rift S, discontinued by the way, has only 80? Getting to that, I tested 80, 90, 120, and 144 hertz in a variety of titles on an RTX 3080 Ti card, which should be plenty to run these games at this resolution at well over 100 FPS. And to be very realistic, I'm guessing because of VR over API overhead, even though, yes, 144 hertz gets smooth in some titles, most of the time it never made a difference. And I'm assuming this is because VR developers are in the habit of controlling the frame rate on their games within the engine to putting a hard cap on it. Now, I'm not a game developer, but by testing on many games at various hertz and not being able to really detect, any difference in terms of that, yeah, no difference at all. I would say slightly smoother on the Steam Lab arcade thing. The ship was slightly smoother, but dare I say, it is so minute that you really have to stare at, is this smoother? So 144 hertz, higher refresh rate. For now, the way VR games are, I would say at least even, dare I say, for another 5 to 10 years, until there's been a dramatic push for graphical fidelity in these titles, along with frame rate and more powerful cards and GPUs come out. I just don't think getting worked up about these little things is enough. I think at the end of the day, 90% of your experience is your eyes. Okay, 80%. And 20% is everything else. Now, this might sound crazy to people. People might say, no, it's 50-50. Okay, even 50-50. The Valve Index just didn't impress me. And it's weird because I really wanted to like it. And I think that's very hard when you're a consumer and you're putting down money on something. There's a natural bias that comes into that where you're like, I know I bought it. And I didn't just buy it because it sucks. Right? So it's understandable, but the way I value and review things is I try to be as objective as possible, not subjective. And again, I try to look at the subjectivity and ask myself, with objectivity, is this boundary of subjectivity too unreasonable? And I don't think when you're spending $1,000, it is. I don't think it's unreasonable to be subjective and be like, well, this sucks. The quality, the picture quality is notoriously just not that good. And I'm sure I'm going to have a bunch of Valve Index people who've bought it. They can't return it. They're going to say, you don't know what you're talking about, man. How dare you? How dare you? Greta Thunberg style. I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of people like that in the comments. Like, you are an amateur and all this stuff. And you know what? That says more about you than it does about me. All I know is I'm here to provide a very objective, with a subjective inflection on this review, while cautioning people about the things to be aware of. Now, what's interesting is the release date on the Index was 2019, whereas, and again, it was, I believe the Index was around April something, and then the Oculus Rift S came out in May. So both of the headsets are 2019. What's surprising to me is when I spoke to a lot of Rift owners and trying to ask them, hey, is this the experience for you? A lot of them were like, why are you comparing this experience to the Rift S? The Rift S is trash. Compare it to the Oculus CV1. And I was like, wait, you want me to compare it to the Oculus CV1? What? It didn't make sense. I'm like, that's a 2016 headset. So we're comparing a 2019 headset to 2016 because of the outside-in tracking. People are saying, no, you got to compare it that way because the Oculus Rift CV1 had the, which was PC-powered VR. It had the, the base stations. I'm not going to call it base station, but it had the little sensors, and you could use 2 lighthouses. That's the term, I believe. But yeah, it had the 2 lighthouses. And people are saying, yes, compare it to, to that. And while I say that's fair, I would also say this is 2019. You're paying $1,000. It better be a hell of a lot better than something in 2016. And the surprising part was, compared to even the Oculus CV1, I found my experience with the Valve Index to be so-so. Now, there are positives to the Valve Index, and we're going to get into them right now. The thing that is the most revolutionary about the Valve Index, to me, and I wish I could use them on the Rift S that will now be actually still my primary VR headset. Yes. I had an Index owner tell me that, perhaps There's nobody who says once you go Index, you don't go back to the Rift S. Once you go Index, you can't go back. Well, I'm going back. Sorry, I gotta go back. This isn't $1,000 worth product. I would struggle to even say it's $390. I would say $399. Put it at $399. Valve is charging too much for this product. And while I understand there's hardware things that went into it and a lot of work, and it doesn't translate to the experience, at least for me. And I'm sure there's a lot of scared people out there who would agree with me, but they're not saying it because they don't want to get mobbed by the Valve Index cult. There is a lot of hype and cult around the Valve Index. So the positives with the Pro, and again, I wish I had this for the Rift S, was the Valve Knuckles. Wow! The Valve Knuckles are incredible. They are literally these controllers. And the magic about them is they feel good. But they attach to the palm of your hand. And so, let's say you're throwing knives, you don't have to keep... Whereas with the Oculus, there's a wrist strap, but then you're holding onto the controller. Otherwise, it dangles and hits you, right? These are attached. So with an Oculus or something, I'm sure there could be a solution for it. Maybe. I'm not sure if there is. No, probably isn't the way it's shaped. It's not. The bar isn't long enough. But the touch controllers, they're good. They're good enough. But the Knuckles just smack the crap out of them. There's no question about it that the Valve Index Knuckles are so superior, it hurts. It hurts me that I have to give them up. It hurts that I can't use them because they're dependent on the lighthouses. It sucks because they are superior, because they're attached to the palm. So when let's say you're throwing a knife and you let go, you can let go. You don't have to. Whereas with the Oculus Touch, right? If you let go, you have to keep hold of the controller. So you're really letting your two fingers go. So. And again, this thing translated to even a bow and arrow, where I was shooting the bow and arrow and I could let go, and I'm going to show you in the VR here. And the biggest thing with the Valve Index is you have complete finger tracking. Every finger is tracked. Every finger. And you're probably seeing me probably give the middle finger at one point, because, of course, right? Of course you got to give the middle finger in VR, but every finger gets tracked. Now, before I got the lighthouses completely perfect, the fingers weren't tracking as well, but again, I figured out the lighthouse situation, and the fingers tracked fine. Incredible. But again, issues other than the Valve Knuckles are the only saving grace of the Index to me. That's it. The controllers are incredible. The rest I can do without. And one other thing I didn't mention is, despite having the controllers, despite having the base stations perfectly, mounted on a stable surface, all this stuff, the biggest problem I have with the Index's setup is not only is it bulky, not only are there a lot of wires, but at the end of the day, it was, despite me doing all this stuff, you're still having to jump through a lot of hoops. And even if you jump through all these hoops, you may not have the perfect setup. God forbid you have giant windows, and I'm not kidding, or some object in your room that you can't remove that's causing a light reflection and crazy stuff like that. Your base stations will make your life a living hell. And this begs the question, if the setup is so annoying with the Valve Index, and it seems so situational, if I can be honest. You must have the perfect play space. It's really not flexible in terms of, with the Rift S. Because of that, it doesn't have that inside-out tracking. The camera's already in there. It's just, it leaves a lot to be desired. Now, if you're a competitive gamer, there is no question. Competitive VR gamer, there's no question you want outside in because it's faster and all this stuff. Yet I would argue that I would highly doubt that somebody, unless you have a very tight, controlled environment set up for the Valve Index, I really doubt that anyone can genuinely say they enjoy the Valve Index's process a lot more than a Rift S, which is literally plug and play. Everything gets powered through the computer, so it is a true powered PC VR. And guess what? The beauty is you don't have to use any outlets. You don't have to worry about the reflections. Yes, it might be slightly less accurate, but again, all I had with the Index was accuracy issues, despite the lighthouses being perfect, despite me making sure my my windows weren't reflecting anything crazy, and all this stuff. And it's unfortunate, really, the Valve Index, because, you know, I wanted to like it, because I know that the Rift S has been discontinued, and Facebook and Meta, thankfully they're removing the Facebook requirement, but they're going to be focusing more on that whole Oculus Link thing, and PC VR doesn't seem to be something they want to do. To me, PC VR is, it uses your graphics card. It doesn't use a little USB-C cable, which doesn't carry that much, and then uses a little encoding setup to send an encoded picture. An encoded picture means that it's a picture that's been processed, so it's not going to ever look, it's never going to be the exact image from the graphics card. And that's a deal breaker for me. I'm into hardcore PC VR, and yet I can't ever imagine paying $1,000 for a Valve Index. And I did pay $1,000 for a Valve Index. It's bittersweet, because the knuckles, I think, are quite revolutionary for the fact that you can just let things go, but I could live without it if it means a superior picture quality with an easier setup. There's just no world that I can genuinely recommend the Valve Index. And this might be surprising to a lot of people. You guys might have heard a lot of great things from people that have been maybe sponsored by Valve, and you know, they want to secure that sponsorship, and I get it. I understand why they're doing it, not that I necessarily agree. In any case, I hope this helped anybody out there who was looking towards the Valve Index. My biggest suggestion to you is, if you are looking for PCVR, try to find the Rift S on eBay. Grab them, because the supplies are almost gone. Grab a Rift S, and you're gonna literally get, dare I say, if the Valve knuckle controllers are 20% of the experience of the Valve Index, and dare I say that because the Valve Index isn't that wowing in terms of picture quality, the knuckle controllers become the only reason to own it, right? And finger tracking isn't even in a lot of games. You have Boneworks, you have Alex, Gary VR mod, and then Steamlab. That's it. You have 4 titles. Stale. And it came out in 2019. Now it's almost 2022. So it's not really adding up to be worth it that much. But again, even if I were to say that the Valve knuckles are, 20% the experience, I would say that the Oculus Rift S is still 90% of the Index's experience equivalent. Not 80%. It's still that much better. Dare I say, it comes almost deadly close. You won't get that high frame rate, but to be honest with you, I generally could notice it, and I love playing above 100 hertz. So on a PC monitor, so even 120 hertz, I noticed that, but in a VR situation, didn't notice it. In any case, guys, I hope this helped. Valve Index owners, I'm sorry if this hurt you. Come to my house. I'll make you some chocolate chip cookies. Bye.